In 1947, American generals, in the shadow of a devastating world war, imposed a new constitution on Japan. They were particularly proud of one piece of it, Article 9. It was a masterpiece of forced pacifism, explicitly forbidding Japan from ever again maintaining an army, navy, or air force. This, they believed, was the permanent solution, the final word on Japanese militarism. Then, just 3 years later, the Korean War exploded. Suddenly, the entire strategic map of Asia was redrawn, and those same American officials looked at a completely disarmed Japan, now a buffer against a rising communist threat, and realized they had a massive problem. Almost overnight, the U.S. position did a complete 180. They began intensely pressuring Japan to rearm, to build the very forces they had just finished outlawing. That instant reversal from "you must never have an army" to "please, please build an army right now" created a bizarre contradiction that defines not just Japan, but the entire concept of a country without a military. It reveals a fascinating and deeply uncomfortable truth about what pacifism really means in a world that still runs on power. And that right there is the core paradox we're diving into today. The security posture of any nation, even one, constitutionally dedicated to peace, is constantly being challenged and reshaped by these chaotic geopolitical shifts.
It really is. I mean, what happens when your security depends on something you explicitly don't possess, like a military?
Or something that's constantly changing, like the mood and interests of a powerful ally.
It forces nations into this state of strategic ambiguity. They're trying to reconcile these deeply held principles with stark geopolitical reality.
So we're starting with the Japanese case, which is this powerful example of forced pacifism under, immediate strategic pressure.
And then we're going to pivot immediately across the region to see how one major power, China, is attempting to solve this very same paradox, but not by relying on external guarantors, but by redefining security entirely.
Right. We're moving beyond just debating tanks and missiles here. We're going to unpack how China is moving toward a truly comprehensive vision of security.
Our mission today is to really investigate the specific diplomatic, the economic, and the non-military initiatives China is using to shape a new security architecture in Asia.
And we're going to examine the ideas behind multilateral dialogue and these non-military confidence-building measures.
It's a huge shift. China is essentially attempting to solve the paradox of peace by integrating every single element of state power, not just the military, into one single holistic security framework.
That's the key, right? The holistic part.
Exactly. We need to look closely at how non-traditional security issues, everything from climate change to cybersecurity, have been strategically elevated into key diplomatic tools.
And how enhanced economic cooperation is being leveraged to foster mutual security across the Asia-Pacific.
It's an integrated approach. It's focused on long-term stability and development, and it aims to reduce that reliance on purely military solutions and, from their perspective, position China as the primary stabilizing force in the region.
Okay, so let's start with the heart of that initial paradox then, the Japanese model. A nation trying to live up to these, the highest ideals of pacifism while existing in one of the world's toughest, most dynamic neighborhoods.
And Article 9 is the legal cornerstone of this whole contradiction. It explicitly states that land, sea, and air forces shall never be maintained.
Never. That's a strong word.
It's arguably the most famous example of disarmament by fiat. But, as we know, the Korean War created an instant security vacuum.
And the U.S. realized that a disarmed Japan was, an invitation to instability.
Absolutely. The pressure began almost immediately, which led to the creation of the Japan Self-Defense Forces, or JSDF, in 1954.
And here we are decades later, and the JSDF operates as one of the most technologically advanced military organizations on the planet.
It's a massive force. We're talking cutting-edge destroyers, fighter jets.
Yet they are technically not an army under Article 9. This feels like the ultimate high-stakes semantic challenge.
It's a constant negotiation between law and necessity. The forces are framed strictly for defensive operations, for internal disaster relief, and international peacekeeping missions.
But that internal tension has just grown exponentially, right? Given the current regional dynamics.
Oh, completely. You have China's massive military modernization, North Korea's advanced missile and nuclear programs, and the persistent instability in the Taiwan Strait. It's a pressure cooker.
And this tension is what fuels decades of debate over these reinterpretations of Article 9. For a long time, the public commitment to pacifism was sacrosanct.
Right. Any discussion of changing Article 9 was politically toxic. You just didn't touch it.
But geopolitical reality forces evolution.
It has to. You mentioned the reinterpretation. The most significant shift came with that 2014 cabinet decision under former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. That decision was absolutely pivotal.
Why was it so important?
Because it allowed, for the first time, for limited participation in collective self-defense. Before this, Japan could only defend itself directly.
So if an ally was attacked, they couldn't do anything.
They couldn't. Now, they could legally defend an ally, specifically the United States, if that ally were attacked, and this is the key part. If Japan's own survival were threatened, it was a reluctant, necessary compromise.
So they're trying to maintain the U.S. alliance while staying, at least technically, within that constitutional constraint.
Precisely. And you can see these reinterpretations reflected in the hardware itself. The JSDF maintains what they call helicopter destroyers, like the Izumo-class vessels.
Which are huge ships.
They are. And these destroyers are now undergoing conversion to carry advanced F-35B stealth fighters.
Which basically transforms them into small aircraft carriers.
For all intents and purposes, yes, the official line remains defensive, but the capability profile is pushing the boundaries of what post-war pacifism ever intended.
That equipment profile is the clearest physical manifestation of the whole contradiction, isn't it?
It is. The decision to invest billions in these high-end offensive/defensive capabilities demonstrates that the core security guarantee rests on preparedness, regardless of what the Constitution says.
And that reliance on the U.S. strategic umbrella means Japan has to be a capable partner, not just some passive protected state.
Exactly. And it's important to, humanize this conflict because it's so deeply embedded in the national memory. We're looking at 3 generations coping with this identity crisis.
Right. So let's break that down.
Okay, think about that Tokyo grandfather. He survived the firebombing, maybe lost family in Hiroshima. For him, the memory of the Imperial Army is one of aggression and catastrophe.
So for his generation, any military expenditure, even for defense, feels like an existential risk. A return to a past they desperately wanted to leave behind.
His security lay in the formal absence of military force. Then you have his son, the man who came of age during the 60s and 70s.
The economic miracle.
That's his entire focus. This generation consciously redefined Japanese identity. Security wasn't found in battleships, but in the efficiency of the assembly line, the reliability of those cargo ships carrying cars and electronics.
Prosperity and technological innovation were Japan's shield.
And the American nuclear umbrella was just an accepted, necessary cost of maintaining that economic focus.
And then you have today, a young communications officer in the JSDF, let's call her Akari. She embodies the contemporary conflict.
She does. She probably didn't join for a national glory or military conquest. Maybe she joined after the catastrophic 2011 tsunami, drawn by the JSDF's reputation for providing crucial humanitarian and logistical aid.
So she sees her role as a protector of the people, coordinating disaster relief, peacekeeping operations.
But then her training schedule includes joint exercises with U.S. forces. She's preparing for a potential conflict in the Taiwan Strait, forcing her to operate right on the edge of that collective self-defense debate. She is, quite literally, the soldier in a pacifist nation.
Trying to reconcile service with constitutional limitation, that struggle really shows that Japan is essentially leasing its sovereignty for strategic stability, completely reliant on an external guarantor, the U.S.
It's a profound dependence.
So now let's contrast that with Costa Rica, which shows pacifism voluntarily, abolishing its military back in 1948.
Costa Rica's path is often held up as the pure example of non-military security. They replaced their army with the public force, basically a civilian police organization focused on internal law and order.
And their entire national security posture rests on neutrality and multilateralism.
Exactly. They lean heavily on bodies like the UN and the Organization of American States, the OAS. And they've successfully established themselves as this global hub for peaceful dispute resolution.
But this principled stance faced a very, very real test during the volatile Central American conflicts in the 1980s. The Nicaraguan crisis is the textbook case, right?
It was a moment of true existential vulnerability for them. Following the Sandinista revolution in 1979, the Contra War spilled over the border frequently.
And in 1985, Sandinista troops actually crossed the border and occupied a sliver of Costa Rican territory.
They did, and Costa Rica mobilized their civil guard, but those police forces were never intended to repel an invading army.
So their primary defense wasn't kinetic, it was diplomatic.
Completely. They appealed instantly to their OAS, called for an emergency session, a fact-finding mission, and this diplomatic mobilization forced Nicaragua to withdraw.
But let's be honest about the mechanics of power here. The diplomacy applied pressure, but the crucial backstop was the implied threat of the United States.
That's the critical, often understated reality of the Costa Rican model. During the Cold War, Washington viewed the Sandinista regime as a significant communist threat.
So Costa Rica's security was implicitly guaranteed by U.S. strategic interests in the region.
It was. The U.S. provided political and diplomatic isolation for Nicaragua and issued these powerful warnings, all implicitly backed by U.S. bases in Honduras and naval forces operating nearby.
A prolonged occupation would have triggered American intervention. Nicaragua understood that perfectly.
Let's go back to that Civil Guard member, Mateo, deployed to the remote northern border in 1985. You can just imagine him. He's standing there, armed with only a police rifle, looking at actual military incursions.
He must have felt profoundly vulnerable.
Of course. He was relying on the weight of international law, which was backed by the implicit might of a superpower far to the north. His sovereignty was defended not by his limited firepower, but by men in suits making high-stakes diplomatic calls.
His realization must have been profound. True security was defended not by their own force, but by the political will of a very large, very powerful friend far to the north.
And that lesson is paramount. Both Japan and Costa Rica demonstrate that security, whether it's by imposition or by choice, is rarely, if ever, purely self-contained. It relies on an external guarantor.
A dependence that inevitably limits absolute strategic sovereignty. And this reliance is precisely what China's new security doctrine aims to eliminate.
Exactly. China is attempting to define a comprehensive security framework that integrates every facet of state power, military and non-military, to achieve long-term stability and, define its own destiny without relying on the goodwill of others.
To understand the Chinese perspective, you have to start with the context of global uncertainty, right? They see the world as deeply volatile.
They do. They describe it as being dominated by unprecedented changes. Risks are intertwined, and they see worsening deficits in peace, development, security, and governance all over the world.
So China frames its holistic approach as a necessary, and from their point of view, a stabilizing response to this international disorder. This is the intellectual stage set for the introduction of Comprehensive National Security, or CNS.
And CNS is the central doctrinal axis of China's national security policy. It was introduced by President Xi Jinping back in 2014. It is designed to be truly holistic.
So it fundamentally broadens the definition of security way beyond the traditional concepts of defending borders and fielding armies.
Oh, far beyond. We are talking about encompassing 12 different areas.
And these include political, economic, military, social, technological, and cultural dimensions. Why is it strategically significant that all these fields are now categorized under the security umbrella?
Well, it's a justification for centralized, coordinated state power. When everything from, say, the development of high-speed rail to the content available on social media is defined as a national security concern.
The state gains enormous justification for allocating resources, increasing surveillance, enforcing strategic coordination across all sectors.
Exactly. This wide lens ensures that no element of state power, from diplomacy to scientific research, operates in isolation from the national security goals.
Let's elaborate on some of those dimensions. Beyond the expected military and economic security, cultural and technological security are featured really prominently.
Cultural security is crucial because it relates directly to ideological stability and political control. It's about protecting the Chinese spirit and the leadership of the Communist Party against ideological infiltration or what they would see as corrosive foreign influences.
Which they view as essential to maintaining social harmony and state functionality.
Right. And technological security, that's obviously vital in the modern era, especially in areas like AI, data, semiconductors.
Absolutely. Placing technological self-reliance under CNS means the state can treat the development of cutting-edge technology or protecting critical data infrastructure, not merely as an industrial policy goal,
but as a survival imperative. This allows for massive, coordinated, state-led investment to prevent vulnerabilities caused by relying on foreign supply chains.
This expansive concept relies on two inseparable pillars: development and security. How does the white paper define that relationship?
The white paper uses a great analogy. It says they are the two wings of the same body and the two wheels of the same engine.
So one can't function without the other.
Not at all. High-quality economic development is identified as the indispensable foundation of security. It provides resilience, resources, and public support for the system.
And conversely, robust security is absolutely indispensable for sustainable growth and the stable conditions required for modernization and openness.
Precisely. So in this view, a stable economy isn't just a separate policy goal, it is fundamentally a security asset.
They warn that development issues can quickly escalate into security risks.
And that the absence of security, whether internal or external, can immediately halt economic progress. They're aiming for a positive interaction and a dynamic balance between the two.
But within this holistic vision, there's a very clear priority structure. While the overall purpose is the security of the people, enhancing citizens' sense of fulfillment and protection, one type of security stands above all others.
That's correct. The non-negotiable foundation, the ultimate priority, is political security.
And what does that mean in practice?
It means the defense of the absolute leadership of the Communist Party of China and the socialist system itself. All other security concerns, economic stability, military modernization, are subordinate to and instrumental in achieving the perpetual security of the regime.
And this framework connects directly to China's strategic culture and the doctrine of active defense. China projects itself as a power rooted in a 5,000-year strategic culture that prioritizes internal stability, prevention, and moderation.
And this self-perception informs how they justify internal control. Because threats are understood so comprehensively, from internal disorder to external encirclement, all actions, including social control and surveillance, are framed as necessary defensive measures.
Defensive measures to preserve stability and harmony.
Right. They present low crime rates and a stable social order as achievements of this effective governance system.
We see this in practice like the revitalization of the Fenkiao experience, which encourages neighborhood watch and, well, informal surveillance.
It's presented as a way to resolve local conflicts and ensure accountability at the grassroots level. The official message is that this robust, comprehensive approach is necessary for risk prevention.
So it justifies a high level of social and ideological control under the pretext of preventing internal disorder, which is viewed as a prerequisite for national strength.
The focus is on preempting instability before it escalates. It aligns perfectly with a strategic culture that values prevention above all else.
So let's look at the military component within CNS, the modernization of the PLA and the doctrine of active defense. The CNS strongly supports strengthening deterrence.
The military component is placed right at the center of national strategy, but it's deeply integrated into the political goals. The objective is to achieve capabilities that are adequate to confront multiple integrated threats and safeguard core national interests.
And the doctrine is defined as active defense, which, despite the word defense, doesn't sound very passive.
It isn't. It's a key strategic nuance. What is active defense? It means China adheres to a defensive military strategy, but it allows for firm and robust responses to safeguard vital interests.
Which could potentially include preemptive actions if they feel it's necessary to neutralize a perceived threat before it materializes on Chinese territory.
That's the active part. It's about building sufficient capability to deter through the threat of an immediate, overwhelming counter-response. This ensures national security relies on its own strength to solve security problems, rather than external alliances.
And this modernization is presented as a response to perceived external threats, specifically strategic encirclement by the West.
The white paper clearly cites instances of growing militarization in the Asia-Pacific region, framing them as containment maneuvers. For example, they specifically point to the deployment of systems like the U.S. Typhoon missile system in the Philippines.
And China views deployments like that as direct, tangible challenges to its security perimeter.
It's a classic security dilemma scenario. China views its own modernization as purely defensive and necessary, while viewing the responses of its neighbors and the U.S. as provocative encirclement. This integrated framework of CNS gives them the strategic flexibility to justify a military buildup while simultaneously promoting peace and development initiatives globally.
Okay, this is where the CNS doctrine extends its reach globally through non-military means.
Exactly. By focusing on non-traditional security, or NTS, China shifts the international focus from direct military confrontation to shared global survival threats.
And NTS issues, terrorism, climate change, pandemics, resource shortages, they're perfect tools for diplomacy because they transcend national sovereignty. They demand multilateral solutions.
Precisely. Since 2012, China has significantly amplified its focus on NTS in state media. It's a signal of their determination to play a greater role in global governance and advance concepts like the community of a shared future for mankind.
So this positions China not as a revisionist power trying to dismantle the system, but as an indispensable partner for managing global challenges.
That's the framing. But we should be clear, China isn't trying to tear down the existing UN-centered global governance system, are they? They're trying to reshape it.
That's the crucial nuance.
It is. China aims to improve the global governance system in an innovative way, making it more representative of changes in the international environment and better reflecting the interests of emerging and developing countries.
So they see themselves as a major stakeholder and beneficiary of existing mechanisms.
Which is why they intend to promote international cooperation within the current framework, particularly on NTS issues where they feel the current system is deficient or biased.
Okay, let's examine the specific areas where China is leveraging NTS for diplomatic influence. First up, terrorism.
Counterterrorism remains a consistent top priority. And this is driven largely by domestic concerns over the three evils: terrorism, separatism, and extremism in areas like Xinjiang and Tibet.
And internationally, this leads to robust cooperation through regional mechanisms. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO, is a prime example of this.
Indeed. The SCO provides a structured mechanism for information sharing, joint training, and coordinated anti-terrorism efforts among Central Asian nations.
And they hold events like the Great Wall International Forum on Counterterrorism.
Right, which attracted representatives from 30 countries in 2019. These are framed as crucial common platforms where China offers its organizational experience and technical solutions. It allows China to position itself as a provider of regional stability.
Next, environmental issues and climate change. This received a massive boost after President Xi proposed that lucid waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets.
That phrase was a turning point. It elevates environmental health from just a domestic concern to a national security imperative, directly linking it to international cooperation.
So China actively calls for strengthened international cooperation on climate change.
Yes, seeing it as part of a package deal with other NTS threats like food security and infectious diseases. By leading on renewable energy initiatives and technology transfer, China portrays itself as a major global contributor to sustainability and development.
Aligning its economic power with global good.
That's the message. And then there's cybersecurity, which is increasingly a flashpoint for international tension. It's also treated as vital to national security.
The complexity of cyberspace requires governance.
It does. And China actively advocates for the development of international rules under the UN framework. They promote a democratic, transparent, multilateral mechanism for governing the internet.
And this frequent advocacy serves a mutual benefit.
It helps solve domestic issues related to data protection and cybercrime, while simultaneously promoting China's vision for cyberspace sovereignty on the international stage.
These various NTS efforts seem to culminate in a major diplomatic blueprint. The Global Security Initiative, or GSI.
The GSI, launched in 2022 and reportedly supported by over 110 countries, is China's main tool for exporting its comprehensive security philosophy. It's explicitly designed to address common security challenges and promote a new form of security dialogue.
We need to nail down the core tenets of the GSI, because they define its normative challenge to the existing order.
Okay, the GSI champions 6 core principles. These include adherence to the principles of the UN Charter, respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, peaceful resolution of disputes through dialogue.
And, crucially, opposing unilateral sanctions or the use of force.
Right. By focusing on common security and the principle of non-interference, China intentionally contrasts the GSI with what it describes as Western-led exclusive military alliances and ideological blocs.
Things like NATO or the Quad.
Exactly. The GSI seeks to build consensus among developing nations that view these existing alliances with skepticism.
And this emphasis on multilateral dialogue and non-military confidence building is clearly seen in China's economic diplomacy, particularly with ASEAN.
Economic weight has become a strategic security asset. Recent diplomatic efforts have focused on finalizing negotiations for the ASEAN-China Free Trade Area, ACFTA 3.0, and upgrading the trade and goods agreement.
And these agreements are expected to significantly reinforce the economic resilience of Southeast Asia and deepen interdependence.
And we see cooperation extending into critical infrastructure and resources, like the agreement on renewable energy exports aimed at advancing the ASEAN power grid.
This is more than just commerce. It's deep geopolitical planning.
It is. Ensuring energy stability and providing the necessary infrastructure for ASEAN's digital transformation ties these nations' future development directly to China's framework and stability.
And the reinforcing forums like the ASEAN Gulf Cooperation Council-China Summit.
Focusing on energy and food security, which demonstrates support for ASEAN's desire to assume a more prominent geoeconomic role.
The logic of the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, is implicitly present here. While this isn't a security white paper, BRI functions as a massive coordination tool between development and security.
Absolutely. The BRI's global expansion naturally falls under the umbrella of comprehensive security. It creates the strategic imperative to enhance China's capacity to respond to risks abroad, protecting the growing number of Chinese citizens, critical infrastructure, and investments in dozens of countries.
But by contributing to global development, the BRI serves as an effective means of securing China's global economic contribution while coordinating development and security objectives across Eurasia and beyond.
It's all part of the same holistic vision.
Okay, so now we turn to how China's comprehensive strategy actually lands in its neighborhood, specifically Southeast Asia, where we encounter the ASEAN paradox.
The paradox is profound. On one hand, you have ASEAN states achieving significant positive economic momentum. They're deepening trade through ACFTA, advancing regional power grids, thanks in large part to their economic ties with China.
But on the other hand, it's really uncertain whether these economic gains are sufficient to mitigate the political and security repercussions of shifting great power dynamics.
That's the rub. The South China Sea tensions remain the most visible security challenge. Negotiations on a code of conduct have made frustratingly little headway, despite decades of effort.
Philippine President Marcos's warning that rising anxieties at sea threaten regional achievements really underscores that instability.
And this geopolitical squeeze forces ASEAN nations into a strategic position known as hedging.
So they refuse to be forced to choose sides between the U.S. and China.
Exactly. Instead, they try to maximize their strategic options. They welcome the U.S. military presence as a balance, while simultaneously maintaining these deep, essential economic relationships with Beijing. They prioritize ASEAN centrality and regional stability above all else.
And this strategic reluctance to choose is precisely what China's strategy capitalizes on. Beijing's primary goal isn't necessarily to win over Southeast Asia completely.
No, it's to influence their hedging behavior just enough to prevent them from balancing against China.
So if the regional states remain neutral, that works in Beijing's favor.
It works entirely in Beijing's favor,
Right.
Especially if the status quo gradually shifts while negotiations drag on, which can happen when China continues to change strategic and military facts on the ground. They invest heavily in diplomatic and economic resources on these neighbors, promoting a narrative of strength, stability, and inevitable success.
And this narrative promotion brings up a fascinating analytical point, the hierarchy argument. China leverages its self-image as a stabilizing power rooted in the permanence and greatness of Chinese civilization.
Right. And the self-perception promotes a naturally hierarchical system of international relations. The implication is that smaller countries should accept that great powers, due to their history, size, contribution to stability, operate by different rules than small powers.
And if this hierarchy is accepted, it reduces the need for China to rely constantly on explicit coercion.
Precisely. Cooperation and consent are achieved through the promotion of these China-centric economic opportunities that are presented as the essential underpinning for regional political and security advancement.
It's that powerful economic metaphor we often hear. When the big river is full of water, the smaller ones never run dry.
That's the idea. The economic benefits and guaranteed stability are maximized only if the local country fully links into the broader Chinese framework. It subtly shifts the cost-benefit analysis for smaller states.
So while observers may point to instances of what they label sharp power or coercive tactics,
China's preferred method, according to its own messaging, is to win cooperation through showcasing mutually beneficial frameworks and economic dividends, like integrating the BRI into ASEAN connectivity agendas where development is coordinated, but only if ASEAN accepts the centrality of the Chinese framework.
However, not all countries are passive strategic price takers. The case study of Vietnam offers a compelling contrast in strategic hedging.
Vietnam is unique in the region. Their elites view China as an extreme threat to their sovereignty. They maintain a psychological preparedness for the sacrifice of blood or treasure to defend their territorial integrity.
And this leads to a distinct dominance denial strategy. They maximize long-term strategic options, often forgoing immediate economic benefits.
And this strategic clarity directly impacts their economic policies. They're designed specifically to avoid overdependence on Beijing, even when Chinese commercial offers might be the most attractive or readily available.
So they minimize or outright refuse Chinese loans for critical infrastructure.
Especially in sensitive sectors like energy projects, high-speed rail, and ports. Instead, they prioritize development partners like Japan, the US, and Korea, even if the financial terms are less favorable, just to ensure diversified strategic independence. This approach really solidified after incidents like the 2014 oil rig crisis.
So to deter China, Vietnam feels it must increase its own strategic importance and military capabilities, particularly in the South China Sea.
Correct. They actively seek to increase their perceived cost to China in any potential conflict. This involves continuous modernization of their naval assets and increasing defense cooperation with major outside powers like the US, Japan, and Australia.
And they do this all while pragmatically maintaining their formal three-nose policy.
Right. No military alliances, no foreign bases, and no aligning with one country over another. Vietnam is intent on shaping the dominant power's calculus by being a determined, prepared actor.
That determination to act as a strategic shaper, rather than a passive recipient of regional dynamics, is what really sets Vietnam's hedging strategy apart from many of its neighbors.
It absolutely is.
So what we've unpacked today is a profound shift in how security is being defined and pursued globally. The historical paradoxes of Japan and Costa Rica showed so clearly that security often rests on an external guarantor.
Whether it's the U.S. strategic umbrella or the leverage provided by multilateral organizations.
Exactly. And China's strategy in the new era fundamentally challenges that model of dependence.
It uses the concept of comprehensive national security integrating political control, economic resilience, development, and non-traditional security as a deliberate tool to redefine the role of the guarantor.
And by doing so, China aims to shape a stable, multilateral order centered on its own comprehensive security vision, eliminating vulnerabilities that stem from external reliance.
China is proactively moving beyond the traditional, purely military definition of power. Non-military initiatives like the Global Security Initiative, deep cooperation on NTS issues like climate and terrorism, and extensive economic integration are becoming primary instruments for global legitimation and power projection.
This strategy ensures that China's core interests are secured through an interconnected web of economic and political dependencies.
Ultimately, this sophisticated emphasis on non-military initiatives is geopolitics in its purest, most modern form. It's using soft power, massive economic weight, and the very definition of security itself as instrumental tools. It ensures that the economic benefits of cooperation in the Asia-Pacific region are increasingly dependent on accepting the comprehensive framework that China provides. You are witnessing the conscious construction of a new regional security architecture where prosperity and stability are offered, but always tethered to an overarching geopolitical vision.